Welcome to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.
Can pop ghost hunting be saved? Can ghost hunters really get science to take them seriously? If so, how?
Well, hello friends, and welcome to the 148th edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, and the third from our new Monday drive time evening slot here on WOON 1240 AM and www.onworldwide.com. I'm Paul, and asking those very good questions was my son and partner in the paranormal, Ben.
So tonight's guest believes the answer to those questions can be yes. Before we introduce him, it's contest time.
Indeed it is. Last week's question was, what ghost is frequently seen in the Komendantskaya Tower of the Kremlin? Now, who doesn't know that? Now, apparently nobody, because we didn't get a single correct answer, which is, supposedly anyway, the famous Fanny Kaplan, who tried to assassinate Lenin in 1918.
So this week's question is, in what Israeli town was 62-year-old Yuri Sakov,
That's right, yeah.
All right, cool.
Yuri Sakov, yeah.
Supposedly abducted by aliens in 1996. If you can handle that, call us locally at 401-766-1240, or from anywhere in the U.S. at 800-449-1240. Just kidding, I'm just messing with you guys out there, making sure you're paying attention. If I don't announce a winner during the show, and you still think you have a shot, drop a line to me at bennettbehindtheparanormal.com. The winner gets an autographed copy of my dad's most popular book, Footsteps in the Attic.
Maybe nobody wants the book, I don't know. Now to our guest. Peter J. Barclay represents a group called the Paranormal League of America, or the PLA, which is also the English acronym for the Chinese Army, as I believe, which is about to debut an internet television show they say will take the paranormal evocation to a higher level. Now, despite the fact that there are many fine minds and sincere, dedicated people in the paranormal hobby, we rarely have them on the show because, for the most part, we just don't think they get it, with all due respect. But the PLA in its efforts struck us as somewhat different, and a group that really wants to see something better. Whether it will succeed is another issue. Now, Peter Barclay has a background of distinguished military service. The son of a U.S. Air Force officer, he was born at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, where, by the way, some interesting UFO doings supposedly have taken place over the years. When Peter grew up, he joined the Air Force, where he specialized in computer communications. At Mather Air Force Base, California, he managed all base-level data communications during Operation Desert Storm. He also served in Germany, the UK, Italy, Korea, and Bosnia. While serving in Oklahoma, Peter was a terrorism first responder, providing first on-site rescue efforts for the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. His work also supported critical DoD, NATO, and NASA space shuttle and allied satellite and space programs. Leaving the Air Force in 1998, Peter lived in San Jose, California, where he taught computer courses, later founding the Teralert Incorporated, which built the National Missing Children and Amber Alert Service. He retired in 2004, lives in Albany, Oregon, and has done so since 2004. The website you would like to look at, of course, is www.paranormalleagueofamerica.org.
Peter Barclay, welcome to Behind the Paranormal.
Thank you.
Okay, well, first of all, Peter, thank you for your service. Certainly is a distinguished record, more so than mine, I must say. And let me remind everyone of our call-in numbers today nationally. Sorry, Ben, this is your line here, but 800-449-1240 or locally at 401-766-1240. If you're stuck in traffic there around Providence, Boston, or Worcester, give us a call.
All right, so let's get right down to the meat and potatoes of this issue. What's your view of popular ghost hunting today?
Well, there's a lot of different things you can look at. I mean, you can take a look at the whole cinematics of it. You know, there's people trying to put out, good television, good shows, and then there's people trying to do honest research. There's obviously we have a huge problem because people look at this and say, well, it's not an exact scientific field, and they boggle back and forth on different viewpoints of it, but the plain fact of the matter is that there's unexplained questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, I got this.
Okay.
Oh, right.
Next question, man.
All right, so what does the Paranormal League of America plan to do about that?
Well, we're trying to mix a good scientific approach with a lot of existing pieces that are out there. We're using people who are sensitive to different things, and we're also trying to do our best to really take very exact scientific measurements and look at these pieces and look at them by the scientific level, as well as understand what's going on with different people and why they see what they see.
Okay. Now, Peter, we love you dearly. Okay. But since 1882 and the founding of the Society for Psychical Research, all the way through the 1930s, 40s, and 50s with Doctors Joseph and Louisa Rhine and a handful of others in the mid-20th century, a few brave and eminent scientific minds, some of whom I worked with in my early days, have tried to get mainstream science to take the paranormal seriously, to no avail. Now, what makes you think your group will have any more success than these eminent scientists did?
Well, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Plain simple fact is that when you're dealing with the scientific community, you have to deal with them at a scientific level. You've got to be able to show, pure research. You've got to be able to show exact measurements. You've got to be able to show exactly what you're doing. You can't just walk around with a little EMF here and go, ooh, look, it's changed, and expect that to be acceptable data. You have to get very accurate and well-encompassing set of data. You've got to get in every single angle of it and really look at it before they're going to sit there and say, look, you found something. We don't spend, $20 and go over and say, we found something unique. You've got to really put yourself into this and spend the time and do all of the work that needs to be done in order to really establish things.
Do you have anyone who can be called a scientist working with you, advising you? And if so, how have they changed from the days when Louisa Rhine, whom I knew, was tearing her hair out because they said, well, it's just the statistical probability just isn't good enough and da-da-da-da-da. They just haven't accepted. Maybe now, we have scientists who grew up with Star Trek and maybe have a little more imagination. Maybe you can do something. But do you have anyone working with you who has scientific quote-unquote qualifications? I mean, is there anybody advising you or helping you along with this?
As far as somebody typically in the field of that, no.
Because relevant fields, you might say, of course, parapsychology, but you could argue that some of the degrees in that are questionable. Psychology, even philosophy, certainly physics. One thing when I was still trying to do that, I would literally go from campus to campus, and this is in the 1980s, trying to get physicists to listen to some ideas that I was starting to have, because I started out in the 70s, and all of a sudden, every case I ran into, the classical spiritualist interpretations just weren't good enough, and it began to lead me into physics, and to this day, not a single. I've had other scientists who have worked with me, but not physicists, and it's driven me crazy. So you seem to have a wonderful golden heart in this, but I don't know if you know what you're up against. I mean, what say you? Do you think you could? What progress have you had so far?
Oh, people have been telling me for years that you have no idea what you're up against. You have no idea what you're dealing with. I mean, putting together the alert system, you have no idea what kind of an environment and political cupola everything goes into.
Oh, yeah.
There are so many groups that are out there dedicated to missing children, but in and of themselves had very little interest in working together. They were all on their own personal crusades to do what they thought was right, and none of them even sit there and say, look, we're just trying to find the truth.
I hear you.
Interestingly enough, in this field, there is a lot less political problems with, trying to figure out what's going on. Groups are a lot more interested in working together. However, they do they do place themselves in a specific area, and they say, look, we are only going to look at it this way. Some people go in and we're willing to antagonize things and try to pull these things out. We follow our own approach, which other people may sit there and say, why are you using mediums? Why are you using scientific readings next to a medium and trying to mix the two together? For me, it makes common sense, but for a lot of other people, it doesn't.
All right.
The physics of how things work, that to me, I honestly don't see why physicists are not more interested in this field.
Neither do I, yeah.
Really don't.
Well,
it literally
yeah.
plays specifically into what they do.
Okay. Let me ask you one more, because Ben's got some questions here, but our good friend Phil Imbrogno, who is a scientist, he's a frequent guest on the show, he says that the problem with trying to prove anything scientifically to mainstream science regarding the paranormal is that the paranormal is beyond science. And I agree with him, because what is science? It's based on a scientific method which essentially assumes a number of things that I don't believe are true. The world is entirely material. Things of that kind. It's a materialist scientific method. It'll build you a road, but it will not define the nature of the universe. And the paranormal requires defining the nature of the universe, in my opinion. What say you? Do you think that the paranormal is within the realm of science and can even be approached from that direction?
Absolutely.
Why?
Look, when you're looking at science, and I'll take physics for a perfect example, in the realm of physics, they look at this and they say, okay, we have 4 basic elements of force and energy that form this universe of ours, okay? And those 4 pieces are huge, okay? But at the same time, they're just little pieces that take over our lives every day. We've got gravity, we've got electromagnetism. Those 2 alone are absolutely some of the biggest ones to deal with. They also don't tend to play a lot of importance on, the strong or the weak nuclear forces, which to me are just as relevant. When you look at these things and you say, look, you're looking at the readings that we're doing. We're dealing with electromagnetism. We're looking at it at the raw level. We're starting at base level and saying, look, we have to start from this, okay, and move up from there to figure out what exactly this is. You can't sit there and say, okay, we're going to just dive into this and start with air and all these other good things. You have to start at a base level and say, we need to start here to prove this scientifically and to take it forward. I fully believe that we'll be able to figure out what is going on. Will it happen now? Will it happen today? Is it going to take a ton of research? Yeah, it's going to take a ton of research. Today, probably not. It's going to take a long time, and people are going to be working on this for years.
All right. What is a ghost? In your opinion. Okay.
What ghost? I'm going to laugh because I hear that from so many people, and it get into so many semantical arguments about what a ghost is. I get into semantical arguments over, what a medium is or what a sense is.
Tell us about it. Yeah, exactly.
How?
And it was. You see what I'm trying to do?
They literally just are trying to find a common ground of saying, look, this is what we're looking at. What do you call it? To me, when people typically talk about ghosts, they're talking about like full body apparitions, things that look like people, and they see an actual person. It's interesting enough to me that you don't find a lot of multiple people seeing the exact same thing right at the exact same time, like 5 people staring straight forward and they say, I saw this. You see people who see similar things, but you can't get an exact grasp on it. Throw that in the eyewitness theory where nobody's the same, but it you have to look at it deeper.
Certainly agree with that. Well, I mean, I don't like to think you're avoiding my question. Okay.
No, I'm sorry.
Do you believe, for example, that ghosts can be spirits of the dead?
Do I believe that ghosts can be spirits of the dead.
I mean, that's the most common explanation.
It's hard to really answer that one in the way that I personally perceive this.
Well,
the way that I
it is for me,
personally perceive this is I think that there's a lot of theories that I could jump to in the very end on qualifying this. I have never experienced a ghost. I'm going to tell you that right now. I've never seen some full-bodied apparition and say, yeah, that's a ghost.
How do you know that?
I think it's possible that there is, they talk about memory energy. And they say, okay, well, this is just, some traumatic event that happened, and the energy is trapped here, and it just keeps reoccurring, the whole tape drive code, Yeah,
I was one of the original advocates of that theory, and then I quickly learned not to believe it, but anyway.
There's people who believe that the energy gets trapped. There's people that have explored a lot of different things. Personally, I think that there's a lot to be understood about not just our own universes, but the universes around us that people don't even realize. It's not until recently that science has had a very big impact on the media as far as TV and getting that information out to people and understanding that there are actual, there's a membrane between us and other universes. And the question can be thrown, hey, is it possible that universe is just so close that sometimes they bump a little hard? Is something bleeding through? Personally, that could be possible, but there could be a million other reasons for it.
Mm-hmm.
Where do ghosts come from? I can't give you a conclusive answer on that. I can't, because we don't have the data to say, look, we found this. This can be repeated. We can show this over and over. That's what I'm looking for. I want to prove that this is here. This can be repeated. We can show it. It doesn't have to be in the exact same place. It doesn't have to be in the exact same time. It could be any number of things. Could you be looking at a weak spot between time and space where you're looking at something that took energy and is repeating from the past because of some bubble? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I want to find out.
All right. I respect that. Actually, your answers are better than I expected they would be. Nobody really knows for sure, but I mean, I have my experience. You have your experience. Ben, did you have any questions before we continue here?
I'm good.
Okay. You're writing furiously. All right. Now, let me ask you this, Peter. Now, in our particular work, we have discovered that the longer you investigate a case, which may start with quote-unquote ghosts, the more you find. We have a case, for example, that has led into a UFO sightings and things of this kind, and they seem to be coming from the same source, the same, as you say, rightly so, perhaps intersections of worlds. Now, what say you about that? How long does your group spend on cases?
Oh, well, there's a lot of time that's spent on cases, not just in the field and at a specific location. I can't tell you how much I'm sitting there and just constantly trying to record data down.
Yeah.
There's a ton of research that has to go into the area. There's a lot of people doing research on information that we pick up from the science. Like I said, we're kind of mixing a heavy scientific piece from me with, and for a lack of better words, people who are sensitive. Okay?
Oh, yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And taking that information and trying to quantify what they are perceiving as well.
All right. What bothers me, and at least that I found in my work, and I found it 30 years ago, was that the scientific method is a straight ruler, and the paranormal is a basketball. You can't measure a basketball with a straight ruler. That's what bothers me. I just they go together like I don't know, blood and water. I don't understand how. I think we've been knocking our heads against the wall for over a century, well over a century, trying to make a scientific method that isn't good enough able to accommodate the paranormal. Which I don't know. I think we ought to be rewriting the scientific method so that it accommodates the paranormal. And I don't know. What say you on all that? I mean, am I wrong?
Well, I think part of the problem with the way that a lot of people take the approach of the scientific method within this field is they jump too far on it. They really, really do. They jump way too far on the field, and they sit there, and because there's one major part of the standard scientific method, and it's called the theory. It's called, you get to make some educated guess based on all the data that you have of something, and then you get to try to prove it or disprove it. It's a guess. Part of the scientific method is guessing, and you are taking this guess, and when people have applied that to the paranormal field, they jump way too far into it. You're trying to measure a basketball with a ruler. Okay, well, try zooming in on that basketball. You'll find those atoms are pretty straight in certain places, and you can measure from point to point to point. Don't jump and try to measure from one side of the basketball all the way to the other. Try just measuring from one point to the next.
Okay, I get what
and
you're
then
saying.
adding them together.
Yeah, all right. Okay, now suppose you're successful. Suppose you actually get data that can be, that you're going to get scientists to listen to, and that they'll take seriously. Then what? I mean, the reason I'm asking that is
I think what you just said is a very good point. Okay, I don't expect to be able to walk over to a whole bunch of scientists and say, "Look, I proved ghosts." I'm going to be able to walk over them and hopefully bring to them a series of data and say, "Look, you need to look at this, because what you've been talking about before, saying that this doesn't exist, there's nothing to say with this, it's fully explainable. Great. Then explain this to me. If you're going to tell me that this is not something, then explain this to me, and give them data that they cannot just throw out the window. You've got to give them solid data."
all right. The reason I asked the question is because, all of us, I think, get into this field because maybe we've had an experience or we just have questions. And whether we've been in it 40 years like me, and again, I may be wrong, you can do things wrong for 40 years or even a year or 2 years on the part of some other people who are very sincere. I think the question arises, I long ago satisfied myself that this is real. And not only that it's real in ways that most people are not, especially of the Western mindset, are not capable of grasping, really. And my point is, I'm not interested, personally, in proving anything to science. What I'm interested in is finding out what it means for our destiny as human beings. I'm not just talking about do we become ghosts or not. I mean, that's not the question. I'm talking about what is the ultimate meaning for how the universe is created and designed. What does it mean for our relationship with ourselves, for our spirituality, for our relationships with each other? What does it mean for our ultimate destiny as a species? That's what I'm interested in. So we get to scientific proof, okay? And that's what I mean by then what? What do we do with it? Usually in the West we use it to destroy things, But so what would be your answer to that philosophically? You got to forgive me. My degree is in philosophy, so that's why I ask questions like that.
That's okay. And being that my field is more towards the scientific, I'll tell you that the answer is 42. That's the best I can tell you.
Okay, 42.
You may not get the rest.
Englishmen speak in riddles.
Alive, I'm sorry?
Englishmen speak in riddles.
It's the answer to life, everything in the universe.
Oh, okay.
It's from an old show.
Ben's got
it. I remember that movie. Yeah. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
But it comes back every once in a while. People will tell you that the answer to the universe is 42.
I see.
And I will tell you right now that is relatively close to what it actually is.
All right.
Because if you write out 42, then I want you to turn around and I want you to write the alphabet out, and I want you to put numbers next to them, 1 for A, 2 for B, and I want you to go look up the word math, and you'll find that the numbers add up to 42.
Interesting.
Because the answers to the universe right now are simply that. It's math. It's looking at this and dealing with this at the numbers.
Okay, well, I can't deny it. Math is the key to the universe, certainly. But of course, there are questions of what it means again too. But I like your answers. Okay. All right. Let's.
Everybody is going to ask that question of themselves. Even if we sat there and said, okay, we all want to know, what happens when you die. There's a whole lot of people who throw in these theories and have dealt with stuff. I mean, I could throw in the huge controversial. What was the guy's name? Persinger or Persinger, built that helmet.
Yeah, the God helmet. Yeah.
It's interesting because I've read their stuff, and some of it is very interesting. Some of it is just way out there on jumping to conclusions way too far and not looking at things right.
Yeah.
And it actually drives kind of close to why we're using mediums in the first place.
Okay, well, I wanted to get into that in the next half hour, but we have to take a commercial break now. And we'll be right back here on Behind the Paranormal with our guest, Peter Barclay of the Paranormal...
New River Press is proud to sponsor tonight's segment of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Benjamin Eno. New River Press offers the best in unusual New Age books. Stand by the side of tonight's host, Paul Eno, as he battles poltergeists and helps suffering souls and families in the critically acclaimed books Faces at the Window and Footsteps in the Attic. Plunge deeper into the paranormal with Paul and learn about its influence on human history, its action in our daily lives, and its ultimate meaning for us in the best-selling Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny. Available now from New River Press, publishers of unusual books. Visit newriverpress.com, amazon.com, or your favorite bookstore. And set for release late this year in one of the most unusual books on the subject ever written, Paul gives us Dancing Past the Graveyard, What Ghosts Have to Say About God.
And we are back Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, our Monday drive time show here on WOON 1240 AM and ONWorldwide.com. And our guest today is Peter Barclay of the Paranormal League of America, and we're having a very interesting conversation about the meaning of scientific proof for the paranormal, things of this kind. And we are starting to get into the realm of mediums and psychics, which I guess Peter's group uses. And we're waiting to hear Peter say why. If you could, please, Peter.
Well, let me ask you this. How many tools do we have for detecting the energies that we're looking for?
I think the best...
How many tools do we have?
Okay, I don't know how many tools we have, but I think the only one that really means anything is our inner selves.
Well, we have wrenches and screwdrivers and things.
And you're not helping. All right. Well, because they all run around.
The common tools that people use are things like EMF meters.
Well, most of that's, in my opinion, nonsense.
Well,
except for certain specific uses.
Is actually a good one because it is actually detecting electromagnetic fields, and that is a big one of those primary forces within nature that does that.
Well, if you can tell what the EMF meter can pick up, radar 8 miles away at some airport, and everybody says, "Aha, ghost." So, it depends on how it's used. It's essentially an engineer's tool. They have infrared cameras, which essentially was started out for military use, as you and I both know, and then ended up in the hands of contractors to tell where your heat is leaking out of your house. But I think these things are useful if you have electromagnetic energy coming out of the ground for geotechnic reasons, and people aren't sleeping well. You say, "We'll move your bed over there." And you'll have a better night's sleep. And I found that is, in my opinion, is the best use that I've ever put those things to. I think trying to prove 19th century ideas by using 21st century technology, I think is for the most part laughable, with a few exceptions.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. Because the point I'm simply trying to make is that the tools that we have are very scarce. Realistic, actual tools that we can use are very scarce. And for the most part, we do have to rely on a lot of other fields to go get their tools and find out what we can use that's going to measure, this data. The infrared cameras, they are a good one. To be honest, if you wanted to find a leak in a tire, you could see it. You could actually pull it up and you could start seeing it because of the change in the airflow from the outside to the inside. You could use little wind gauges to check things. There's a million different measurements that you could be trying to take.
Mm-hmm.
Heat is a big one when
right.
it comes to things that go out there, because anytime you get energy, anytime you get atoms moving around real fast, you get friction, you get heat, and it's a symptom. It's like looking at your car and saying, what noise is it making? Well, the noise that this stuff makes is heat in a lot of cases. So thermographics is actually a good way of looking at this. EMF, that's another good way of looking at it. When it comes to mediums, and I'll tell you what, I'll pull off on the God helmet guy.
Oh, yeah, Michael. Can I just say, in case people don't know who that is, that's Dr. Michael Persinger of the University of Sudbury, Ontario, who has been a guest on our show before. And he invented a way to, and there are other people who do this, apply electrodes to the brain and simulate things like near-death experiences, things of that kind. Okay, take it away, Peter.
In essence, what he did with his helmet is he looked at it and he said, okay, well, the sentient part of the mind, the part of us that's self-aware, is sitting over here on one side of our hemisphere of our brain, and he said, okay, over here on the right side we have something, but why isn't it doing something else? What exactly does that do? And his theories have come down to, from what I understand of him, and I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on what his theories are, but he's come down to it's the part of us that says, okay, what happens after we die? And it's that part of us that says, okay, if we're self-aware, we know that we're here and we'll eventually be gone. But that's a scary-ass thought. Use my language, but that's a scary, scary thought. So how do we live with so much fear in us? Well, that other side of the brain is these things that provide this relative answer to that, says, we're energy or something. And his theory says, this is why people believe in God and applying electromagnetism to their brains, and this is what they see. In some of my thoughts and work with our mediums is to sit there and say, okay, if there is this field, and we have an electromagnetic field running around this room, little bubble, something beating from something, these people seem to be sensitive to it. I'm not, but they appear to be sensitive to it. Some people are allergic to bee stings, for crying out loud. I'm not. So as far as I'm concerned, it's the same thing there. It's something in them genetically that makes them predisposed to reacting to those fields. They are reacting to something. It becomes very interesting to people when they're able to take somebody who is like that, put them in an area and say, okay, we're going to expose you to this. And these people come out with information that is too close to something going on there for it to be coincidental.
All right. Well, let me just stop you there, Peter. We operate on the multiverse theory, at least our work does. And I wanted to ask you about some scientists in a minute and get a little bit more into Persinger, but the issue with multiple worlds is that quantum physics, at least those who believe in that theory, anything like in the way we do, say that the laws of physics may vary from universe to universe. That's why things will float around a room in our consciousness stream. Now that's why, I've been hit over the head with a chair. I've been injured by poltergeists, things of this kind. It might not have been deliberate. It's just the laws of physics are different when these membranes cross, which is one of the objections I have to. I agree with everything you're saying, but whether it applies again to the paranormal in this sense, the multiversal sense, is a big if. And that's what I'm saying.
That's a very good point to make. And you're talking about, and I love the fact that you brought that up, because that really plays a lot to why I think that people jump too far in their conclusions. And you have to play back to the fundamental forces within our universe. Because when you look at those fundamental forces, you go to other universes, and the fundamental forces will be there, but they may have a completely different way of interacting with what's going on. And so you have to sit there and apply scientific method and say, okay, we learned how things work. We've got these scientific theories and we've placed them down. But when you want to look at another universe, you have to start over from scratch. You have to go back to the drawing board and say, okay, we have to redefine what those laws are before we sit there and say, okay, then we know why it does it here.
Well, how do we do that? I mean, the paranormal, in our opinion, is multiple universes. That's what it's about. So how do you even begin to apply our science from our conscious world to even begin to approach? Even begin to approach it? You obviously have. But that's a question we're not going to answer on the show. Let me make a point about Persinger. When he was on the show here, we were prepared to blow him out of the water. All right. But he was, and the big question we have is, okay, so you say you can simulate these phenomena, such as near-death experiences, all this, the temporal lobe stuff, all right. But I say, and our main question is, yeah, you say you can simulate it, but what does that mean? Why does that mean it's not real? How do you know you're not opening doors to worlds that are really there? These are questions I asked when I was working in psychiatric hospitals as a grad student, to people who were schizophrenic. I mean, these people seem like they were living in real worlds. I mean, how do you know we're not the ones who are abnormal and the doors are shut to us? And he agreed. He didn't agree, but I mean, he was much more reasonable about it than I thought. He seemed to be open-minded to the possibilities that these things are real. He didn't seem to be, as we expected, to be writing off all of paranormal phenomena, or at least psychic phenomena, as things that could be manipulated by his God helmet. So I think we kind of respected him for that, and he kind of surprised us in the right direction with that. And, of course, the only question here is, there are scientists already working on these things, and my question is, why doesn't the PLA link up with them somehow? You've got the American Society for Psychical Research, you got the Society for Psychical Research in Britain, who in some ways coordinate their research. They're working with many of the questions you have brought up, and they kind of gave up on, I shouldn't say gave up on mainstream science, but they've gotten into things like transpersonal psychology, things of this kind, and into some physics. I wouldn't be put myself forward to suggest anything to you, but I might think that you would consider some sort of liaisons with these groups in order to not reinvent the wheel, or to try and get somewhere, not sort of being on your own, like sort of Thomas Edison in the basement, because that's not really necessary anymore. So I don't know. What say you? Do you think you could work with these people, or you don't know if they take you seriously, or what's the story here? How come you haven't linked up with groups like that?
As far as linking up with specific groups, you start getting into the politics of, how do you get organizations to work together. But as scientists, I've read Persinger. I've read his stuff, and it's nice to hear, that he's very open-minded.
That's what he said to us.
I've gotten, there's a lot of people who take his data way too far.
Oh, yeah.
And then push certain ideas like, this is what he's definitely all over, and he thinks this. And it's like, no, he threw out a possibility, but he's not closed off to a lot of other ones. A lot of people in the scientific field, I should not say the scientific field, but in this field, are trying to do the best that they can with what they have and to do these things. And we draw on everyone. We look at everyone's data and we say, how can we look at that? If they come up with some new tool or some new way of looking at things, I'm going to want to see it. Whether I'm directly working with the group or not, I'm looking at what they're doing. I'm watching as many of these groups as I can, and trying to find better ways of doing what I do. And it's the same thing everywhere. I mean, you could look at network engineers.
Yeah.
They work on a specific environment that they have in front of them, but they draw on everyone. You go to developers. There's huge sites open, just everybody sharing code. That's all we can do. You sit there and say, well, why aren't you working with all of these other developers? They're doing the same thing. Well, in a way, they are. They go to these places, they look at their code, and they go, wow, I can apply that here. And to work at, some combined effort as one huge organization underneath some group, you're talking politics. And there's too many of us who are like, we're not interested in the politics. And to be honest, a lot of us aren't even really interested in saying, look, we want to prove to the scientific community that this is real. It's like, look, we already believe there's some type of scientific piece to this. You don't want to believe it? Fine. You can also believe that the world is flat if you want to. You know,
a lot of people do. So
there's a scientific piece to this, and we're going to explore it.
All right. Okay, Peter. I'm just running out of time here, but I just, I'm not saying you should link up with the, East Overshoe Ghost Hunters team, but I'm talking about, the some people like the American Society for Psychical Research in New York, things like that, if they'll take you seriously. But anyway, I'm going to give you a chance to talk about your TV show that you're doing on the internet, and what's that about?
Well, the show is called The Paranormal Truth. It's on Coldcast. We are working right now in putting together the shows, and we've come out with a lot of interesting data, for a lack of better terms for everything. There's a lot of things that have been going on. We've done a lot of research in places, and we've put people into these situations. We've also been doing a lot of best measurement type situations that we can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, and this is the Coldcast Network, and that's when will that be debuting?
I believe it's going to be the middle of next month.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll refer people, of course, to the website, paranormalleagueofamerica.com. And sorry we're out of time, but Peter, thank you for being with us. It was a very interesting conversation, and I wish you luck, but I don't... I don't know how much luck you're going to have, but maybe you'll surprise us. And really, really admire what you're trying to do anyway. But thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, folks. We got a couple of emails here we wanted to get to because there's one especially I wanted to answer. But we had a very interesting experience last night. I don't know if you heard our CBS show. It was our second in our series of Rendlesham UFO affair specials. Rendlesham, of course, being in Suffolk, England, and the between a forest between the Bentwaters and Woodbridge air bases, joint U.S. British air bases.
Are we doing another one of those?
Yeah, actually, we're going to take the 2-hour Achieve radio specials that we have at the end of the month from now through November. Not now, but from July through November, and we're going to try and shorten it by an hour and do those because we've just been scratching the surface.
Works.
Yeah, well, this is a letter from Megan J. in Windsor, Ontario, and Megan writes, a few friends and I had a Behind the Paranormal party last night. They came to my house and we gathered around the radio to hear the 3-hour special. My compliments on your efforts to stay on the air, but the technical problems were almost beyond belief and very disappointing. It's hard to believe that an operation like CBS could be so screwed up, unless there was some outside interference. And I've already seen speculation about that on the internet today. What we did hear of the show was amazing, especially when Nick Pope apologized for the British government's treatment of the U.S. Air Force guys who were in contact with the UFOs. But here's my question. With the number of people that must have been listening to the show, wasn't the interference a little obvious? And who would do it and how? We always assume it's the government, but could someone else be suppressing UFO information, especially from guys like the witnesses you had last night? Well, Megan, that is a very, very interesting and loaded question. One of the things that happened among the many, and Ben and I still can't get over this, was between the second and third hours, we lost the CBS uplink completely. We heard our producer in Detroit saying some things, but it was very muffled. And then there was laughter that we could hear. And you talk about creepy. So then we had to switch to a parallel network, the Para-X network, which is an entirely internet network. So what these poor people listening on the radio were hearing, I don't know. But that went down too. So 2 networks in one night, and we had 3 witnesses from this amazing incident, which has been called the Roswell of Great Britain, and also one of the most amazing UFO events, militarily speaking, ever recorded. So I can't tell you. I don't know who's doing this, but whenever we have a sensitive guest on this topic, and we get into some of these things about cover-ups and UFO, the nature of it, strange things start to happen. It was a relief to come into ON tonight, where things are always well-run and very, very normal, okay, in that sense. So, Megan, I can't answer you, but just stick with us, and we'll get the word out. This is one I'm answering. This is from Cher Anatole Holmes. I do not know where she is from, but she writes, yes, not that Cher, but she writes, Hi, Paul, on 4/4/10, you podcasted that IMU was getting accredited, IMU being the International Metaphysical University, was being accredited. What's the status on that? I'm very interested in enrolling. And the only reason I'm saying this on the air is because Cher did not leave her email address. So I don't know how to get in touch with her otherwise. Hopefully she's listening. International Metaphysical University is a new operation that is taking place. It's headquartered in West Virginia, and they are attempting to become accredited, which means recognized by the U.S. Department of Education through one or more of its arms, in this case the Distance Learning Council. And what this would do would be to make any degree earned from there to be legitimately recognized by law. There are a lot of schools on the internet that are not accredited, and you send them for $30, they'll send you a doctoral degree. I mean, this is not what this is. When it's accredited, that will not certainly be very, very worthy of being taken seriously. But the thing is that a college has to exist for 1 year before it is accredited. That's the rule as I understand it. The IMU was only just founded in September, and they're working very hard to get accredited. They have an accreditation expert who's working with them. And hopefully after September of this year or around the beginning of next year, that should occur if it's going to. And it's significant because it's probably the first accredited metaphysical school since Aristotle. So best of luck to them, especially because I teach there myself. Only one course so far, but that seems to be what the situation is with that. All right. Now we have another email here. This is from Scott Rondo in Ottawa, Ontario. We've got a lot of Canadian listeners writing in lately. And Scott would like to know, well, this is a little bit long and complicated. We'll try and take as much as we have time to do. Okay, this is...
Just take it in parts.
This is... Yeah, okay. He said he had heard us on the air and had to contact us because our theories on the multiverse are identical with his. Okay, we hear that a lot. People think it's hard to get their minds around them. Once they do, they say, aha, this is really what's happening to me. Mine is entirely based on dreaming, he says, but points to reality working just like a dream. Okay. In a nutshell, I think dreams are an expression of wave-particle duality. That's a little bit of quantum physics in there. I'm not even going to try to explain it. Matters of... You want me to you explain it?
I don't know what it is.
All right, well, at least... Okay. All right. Essentially what it is that when you look at something, you change its nature. Sometimes some of these...
That's the name of it? Oh,
yeah.
Crap.
There you go, Ben. You have way with words.
Yep.
One of the... When you have a subatomic particle, it can be a wave or a particle depending on how you look at it.
Right.
Okay? So when you look at it, it can change its nature. And so people are, well, so what? Well, the idea is that when you have that taken to the level of grasshoppers and people and trees and oceans and things, if people look at something, it can change its nature. All right. Not everybody agrees on that.
It's like you're explaining to like a 5-year-old, like, well, you see, little Jimmy.
Well, okay. For example, all right. I take this pen and I drop it. I hit the microphone with it.
Okay.
Okay. Hit the microphone with it. I've created another world. I have collapsed a wave function that creates a world in which this thing hit the microphone.
Oh, duh.
The world in which the thing did not hit the microphone continues unaffected.
Right.
Okay. I've collapsed the wave function.
Right. Oh, cool. It's like that movie. Donnie Darko, yeah.
Yeah, Donnie Darko,
yeah. It's like Donnie Darko.
Yeah. Did he well, you got a B+ in physics, didn't you?
Oh.
Because you didn't
this isn't quantum physics. It's just
well,
like
anyway. All
physics
right.
1.
Okay. Matter supposedly exists. First, a probability waveform, and its act is observing it. Okay, he just said what I just said. Okay, a good analogy for a probability waveform would be an archetype. Okay, he goes on through that. And in other words, his point here is everything requires your attention to exist. And he gets into the notion of parasites and applies it to that. Now, what parasites are entities we run into all the time, and a lot of other paranormal people do too, and don't perhaps realize it. Negative entities that feed upon our negative energy. I can't put it in any more scientifically accurate words than that, I suppose. And he's working with dreams here, and he's trying to explain, I guess, how parasites exist and work. All right. Now, he's developed several rules here. The first is, of course, everything requires your attention to exist. The more attention you give something, the more related detail it creates. the noises. Now, in a typical paranormal case, it doesn't start out with something jumping through your mirror and scaring you half to death. It starts out with little taps on the wall, little footprints or at your door, or footsteps in the attic, as the book title says. And as Scott writes here, the noises get louder and more violent, evoking an emotional reaction. I always use the example of a tooth dream gone bad for this. People, some people have dreams their teeth are falling out, and I'm at the age where that's no dream anymore. Okay. So anyway, he's saying the more attention you give something, the more power you give it. We agree with that.
Yeah.
The more we see all the time that people who live in houses where these parasites are operating, the more attention you give it, very often the stronger it gets. Okay, and that's really true here. Now here's another rule that Scott has added here. I don't get into archetypes. This is getting real complicated.
So
I'm familiar
cool,
with. I feel like you get college credit for listening to this show.
Yes.
All right. Archetypes are essentially symbols or pictures we all have in our minds. We all share it. Okay. It's a common race theme or folk theme that all humans kind of have. Like maybe that came from strong emotions that were created by us being chased by saber-toothed cats. All right. Or one might be a lot of people are afraid of snakes, particularly pythons. Now, pythons can't hurt us, but when we were the size of chimps, if you believe in that sort of thing, then they could strangle us and kill us. And there's a folk memory or an archetype that we are afraid of pythons. Okay, this is apparently what he's getting into here. So this message is already too long, he writes, yet not nearly long enough. Basically, the methods I've found to reliably control things in dreams apply to reality, so reality must be a dream. I don't know if I go that far. But lucid dreaming can be an important tool in learning about the paranormal. Lucid dreaming means you realize that you're dreaming, and you can control it. I think we have done shows on that. We will continue to do so. Anyway, Scott, thank you for writing. Very complicated, but also very much to the point, I guess, of things that we already kind of use and know. But I might put it in a different way. Can I have your script, please, Scott?
Oh, sure.
Okay. The end of it, because we want to... Oh, here, wait. All right. Okay. We'll get it. It's nothing to compare with CBS last night. Not that it was their fault. All right. So, many thanks to our producer, Craig Pelletier, the great. And we'll see you next week, Monday, June 28th, right here on 1240 AM on ONWorldwide.com at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 Pacific. Our guest will be Dr. Karen B. Good, Johnny's sister. I shouldn't have said that. Author of the new book, Children Who See Ghosts. And that will be our subject. Very interesting.
Next weekend is our end of the month 4-hour Behind the Paranormal marathon once again. We start on Sunday, June 27th with our 2-hour internet special on www.achieveradio.com. Our guest will be UFO greats Stanton Friedman and Frank Ficino for an in-depth look at the Flatwoods monster case of 1952 and how the recent Monster Quest TV episode, which they were in, allegedly messed it up. That's at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, and on our regular Sunday show on June 27th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on CBS Radio in Boston, Detroit, and Seattle, and online at www.newskyradio.com and at www.parax.com. We'll have an open line show to hear from listeners and get the latest news from our show field reporters. Check our show website at www.behindtheparanormal.com and your local radio schedules for CBS stations that carry the show and the websites where you can hear us from there and anywhere. And remember, you can always get free podcasts of all the shows along with show schedules and guest information at www.behindtheparanormal.com.
Okay. And we'll hopefully none of the letters will be quite as complicated as that last one, but usually people ask simpler questions. In the meantime, we leave you with a thought-provoking quote from Dr. Carl Jung, the guy who came up with the idea of archetypes, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
He says, I shall not commit the fashionable stupidity of regarding everything I cannot explain as a fraud. What do you think of that, Ben?
Well, everything you cannot explain as a fraud? Well, you see, it reminds me of this dude that we had on today. It's like... science. No, I'm not insulting him. It just makes me think of what he was talking about.
I didn't say anything.
Well, I know you guys didn't say anything, but it just made me think of it.
Well, fortunately for you, we have to go.
Explaining everything. Yeah, you know what? Let's just see you next week.
Okay, see you next week.
Return to this radio frequency 167 hours from now for another edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno.